Hey everybody, what's going on? So in this section, what I want to first do before we get into lead generation is I want to cover some of the lead generation myths out there that really prevent people from succeeding when it comes to outbound lead generation. Now, there's going to be three major myths that people typically will have when they're getting started with lead generation. The first question that people have is, does cold emails and LinkedIn messages actually work, right? If you send a message, what are the chances someone's going to respond back to you and take a meeting with you, right? And so because people don't know, then a lot of times they are hesitant to send out any messages. The second challenge that a lot of people have is that instead of sending a cold email, why don't you just cold call them or go to networking events, right? Versus why should you send cold emails and LinkedIn messages versus everything else, right? So that's number two. And the last myth that a lot of people face is that why should anybody take a meeting with them, especially if they're a startup or someone that's just starting out? Why should a large company that's already successful take a meeting with you? So in this section, I wanted to break down these three myths and show you guys how effective outbound lead generation can be for your business by breaking down these myths. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the first one. Does outbound lead generation actually work? And I understand why people have this fear, because anytime you're doing something new, you're not really sure what the results are going to be. So if you spend a couple hours sending a couple emails, hoping someone takes a meeting with you, a lot of people are, one, afraid of wasting their time, and number two, people are afraid of rejection, right? Because nobody wants to look like a fool and send an email and nobody respond back, and they think, oh, it's just a waste of time. Oh, emails don't work, LinkedIn doesn't work, right? But in reality, it absolutely does. And to kind of share with you some insight, throughout my sales career, I've sent thousands and thousands of emails to all different people in all different industries, from small companies to Fortune 500 companies. And I'm telling you, cold emails and LinkedIn messages absolutely do work. And in fact, a lot of startups in Silicon Valley do grow their businesses just from outbound lead generation, and that's cold email and sending LinkedIn messages just to generate those meetings. So throughout this entire foundation, not only am I going to show you how powerful cold emails and LinkedIn messages can be, but I'm going to show you the exact methodology that I use to send thousands of emails to generate a consistent flow of meetings every single month. It's not just me that does it or my student. It's literally thousands of companies around the world who have figured this out, are consistently generating meetings, and I don't see why you can't do that as well. Okay, so myth number two, why would you send a cold email or a LinkedIn message versus going to a networking event or cold calling? Now, the thing with cold calling is that about less than 5% of people actually pick up the phone when you give them a call. So that means if you call 100 people, let's say 5 people are going to pick up. Now, if 5 people pick up the phone, then there's a small chance that you're actually even going to get the right person to answer your call. So meaning your chances of probably connecting with the right person are definitely less than 5%. And think about it. If you make phone calls, you can only talk to one person at a time. When you send emails or LinkedIn messages, you can send hundreds or thousands of messages at a time, potentially increasing the amount of people who may be interested in your product. So outbound lead generation obviously is just much more scalable than any type of form of cold calling. Now, what about networking events? Well, the thing with networking events, although they do have its value, again, it's just not scalable, because if you go to a networking event, you got to think of the time that you put in to meet somebody. First, you got to drive to the event. Then you got to network and talk to all these people that may or may not be interested in your product or service. And then from there, you got to follow up with them, and then you're going to try to sell them, right? So it's a long process before you even qualify somebody to see whether or not they are going to be a fit for your product or service. Now, with a cold email, you send a message, and if someone's interested, they take the bait and they're going to take a meeting with you, and you're going to be able to figure it out right there on the spot. So that's why cold email and sending LinkedIn messages are just so much more scalable than anything else that requires a one-on-one interaction. Now, there is value in the one-on-one interaction once you get in the meeting with them, but to really generate that lead and to figure out if people are interested, then I recommend doing outbound first and then talking to anybody who may be interested in buying whatever it is that you have to sell. Now, myth number three, why should anybody take a meeting with you, right? And this is especially useful for startups where nobody knows who you are, or if you are a solo entrepreneur or an entrepreneur who's just starting out. Why would people take a meeting with a nobody? Well, the reality is it's all about your results. And now, even if you just started your business, if you can promise and deliver on some amazing results, of course, people are going to want to pay you money for it, assuming that you can actually do the work that you promised. Let's say you're selling some type of product or service, and the result is that people will generate 50% more revenue per year. Well, if that's actually true and you can prove that and you can actually deliver on that, of course, people are willing to pay you money, because if they're able to increase their revenues by 50% just by buying your product or service, everyone's gonna do that, right? So you gotta think of it more like, instead of thinking, you don't have a brand, you don't have this, you don't have that, it's all about thinking, what results can I give for my potential customers, and how do I demonstrate that and prove that it's actually real, and then deliver on that promise. And the reality is, when you're sending a cold email or a message on LinkedIn, your goal is not to sell something. Your goal is simply to just schedule a meeting. And on that call, when you're talking to the customer over the phone or in person, you're trying to see whether or not it's a fit to work together. It may be a fit and you move forward. It may be not a fit and you may just end the conversation right there and maybe revisit it in the future. But when you're sending an email or a LinkedIn message, again, you're not selling anything. You're not being pushy. All you're saying is, hey, this is what I do. This is how I can bring you value. Let me know if you want to schedule a meeting to talk about whether or not it makes sense to work together. If it does make sense, great. If it doesn't, that's totally fine, right? And so it's not a pushy sales tactic. It's really just offering people value, having a conversation, and then if they want to buy your product or service because it's that good, then they're going to buy it. So once you flip your mindset, and instead of think of how small you are, just think about the value that you can bring to people. And that is the reason for why anybody will take your meeting, assuming you are providing amazing results. So with that said, those are the 3 myths that I wanted to cover with you guys to really show you guys that cold emails and LinkedIn messages, lead generation by outbound absolutely does work. People will take a meeting with you if you give them maximum amounts of value. So I really hope that sheds some light when it comes to outbound lead generation. And now I'm going to see you guys in the next lesson.